Hi, this is Attorney Lei Cabras, and as part of my series of video lectures on the coverage of the 2023 bar examinations on mercantile or commercial law, today I'm going to discuss one of the special laws which is rather included in the syllabus, and this is the Foreign Investments Act. What is the Foreign Investments Act? What is the policy in relation to the enactment of this law? The policy is that the state should attract or promote and welcome productive investments in activities which significantly contribute to national industrialization and socio-economic development. And also that foreign investment shall be encouraged in the enterprises that significantly expand livelihood and employment opportunities for Filipinos, and that foreign investment shall be considered as welcome as a supplement to Filipino capital and technology, and that foreign-owned firms catering mainly to the domestic market shall then be encouraged to undertake measures that will gradually increase Filipino participation in such businesses or industries. And these are the state policies in relation to the enactment of this particular law. Now, first, what is foreign investment? So, foreign investment is an equity investment made by non-Philippine nationals in the form of foreign exchange or other assets which are actually transferred to the Philippines and duly registered with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, which shall of course assess and appraise the value of such assets other than foreign exchange. So here, we have this definition of what a foreign investment is. Kailangan non-Philippine national, and it can be in the form of foreign exchange such as dollars, euros, and other assets which would have that monetary value also, or equivalent. And another thing which we should consider about this is the concept of doing business in the Philippines. Now, in corporation law, of course, on the part of foreign corporations, we also have this definition of what doing business in the Philippines means. And under this law, we apply. We have the same meaning of what constitutes doing business in the Philippines. And this would include soliciting orders, service contracts, and opening offices, whether called liaison offices or branches. Second, appointing representatives or distributors domiciled in the Philippines or who in any calendar year stay for a period of periods totaling 180 days or more. Then third, participating in the management, supervision, or control of any domestic business, firm, entity, or corporation in the Philippines. And finally, doing any act or acts that imply a continuity of commercial dealings or arrangements and contemplate to some extent the performance of acts or works or the exercise of some functions normally incident to and in progressive prosecution of the purpose and object of its organization. Okay, so medyo technical, di ba? Parang ang daming sinabi, maran tayo enumeration. But I think, bottom line is that you are considered as doing business in the Philippines if you are a foreign corporation, if it is not an isolated transaction, if you have the intention of continuing your business, which was established under the laws of a different country, when you establish yourself in the Philippines. So it includes, sabi nga, branches, liaison offices, it includes, appointment of representatives, participating in the management or supervision of domestic business firm or entities. So that's it. When you look at the totality of the acts which constitute doing business, then it shows the intention. You look into the intention of that particular entity. Gusto ba niya na mag-business sa Pilipinas? If it appears that from the acts of that particular entity, it would want to, then that constitutes doing business under our law. Now, what are the instances that are considered as not doing business. Okay? Para mas maintindihan natin, ano naman ngayon yung mga hindi kinukonsidera as doing business, so that we can, juxtapose doing business with what is not doing business. So, mere investment as a shareholder is not doing business. Having a nominee director or officer to represent its interest is not doing business. Appointing a representative or distributor which transacts business on its own, in its own name and for its own account, is not doing business. Publication of a general advertisement to any print or broadcast media by and of itself is not doing business. Maintaining a stock of goods in the Philippines solely for the purpose of having the same process by another entity is not doing business. Consignment by the foreign corporation of equipment to the local company to be used in the processing of products for export is not doing business. Collecting information in the Philippines is not doing business. And finally, performing services auxiliary to an existing isolated contract of sale, which are not on a continuing basis, is also not doing business. This is under RA 70.1. Okay? So, please take note that most of the activities which I have mentioned, based on the law, do not bring any direct receipts or profits to the foreign corporation, and therefore they may not be considered as doing business. Now, for instance, one of the examples is consignment, and another one would be simply appointing a representative, but this representative is independent. So clearly, it will not constitute doing business in the Philippines. Otherwise, diba, if this will be considered as doing business, lahat na lang, diba? Lahat na lang ng mga foreign corporations which might have certain transactions in the Philippines would be considered as doing business. Okay? And what about the so-called isolated transaction? Nabanggit natin kanina, one of those considered as not doing business in the Philippines is an isolated transaction. Anything related to an isolated transaction, there's no sense of continuity. So, according to the case of Eric's PTE Limited versus Court of Appeals, what is determinative of doing business is not really the number or the quantity of the transactions, but more importantly, as I mentioned earlier, the intention of an entity to continue the body of its business in the country. Okay? So the number and quantity are merely evidence of such intention. Okay? So the phrase, and this is very important, the phrase isolated transaction has a definite and fixed meaning. Okay? It is a transaction or a series of transactions, so it can be more than one, set apart from the common business of a foreign enterprise in the sense that there is no intention to engage in a progressive pursuit of the purpose and object of the business organization. Whether a corporation is doing business does not necessarily depend upon the frequency of its transactions, but more upon the nature and character of its transactions. So, if it is merely an isolated transaction, then it does not constitute doing business. And to emphasize, when we say isolated transaction, it is not tantamount to a single transaction. It may be more than a single transaction. It can even be a series of transactions. Now, another thing which you must remember about the Foreign Investments Act is the definition of what is considered as an export enterprise. So what is it? It is an enterprise wherein a manufacturer, processor, or service, including tourism, exports 60% or more of its output, or when a trader purchases products domestically and exports 60% or more of such purchases. Okay? So, it's not for the domestic market. Okay? So, 60% or majority of what you're producing is for the export market, for overseas. So, it's considered as an export enterprise. Okay? Now, what about a domestic market enterprise? It is an enterprise which produces goods for sale or renders services to the domestic market entirely, or if exporting a portion of its output, this fails to export at least 60%. So as long as majority, no, of what it is producing is for the domestic market, then it is considered as a domestic market enterprise. Okay. So those are the difference between the two. Threshold natin is 60%. If 60% outside, then export enterprise. But less than 60%, meaning majority of what it produces is intended for the local market or the domestic market, then it is considered as a domestic market enterprise. Okay? Now, in relation to this, let us go to the Philippine Public Service Act. This is a very old law. However, recently, on March 2, 2022, the Public Service Act was amended. Okay? And while the original law still stands, there are some very important amendments made for this particular installment of amendments to related laws. So kanina, sinabi natin yung Foreign Investment Acts. Ngayon naman, tutuloy tayo sa Philippine Public Service Act and how it relates to foreign corporations which have presence here in our country. Okay. So what are the salient features of this law? Okay. First, take note that here the term public utility is now clearly defined and distinguished from public service. So public utility versus public service. Okay. Why am I emphasizing this? Because before, based on our jurisprudence, we used to interchange the term public utility with public service. Parang nagagamit siya kahit alin ang gustong gamitin, di ba? So, sometimes you are even confused what constitutes public service and what constitutes public utility. In fact, most of our Supreme Court decisions, had considered public utility as public service. Okay? And that's why it runs the whole gamut from what? From providing electricity, water, etc., telecommunications, to include even public works at times. Okay. But with this amendment, it is no longer the rule. Why? Because there is now a definition of what public utility is. So it has been defined as a public service that operates. Okay, so mas malaki pa rin yung konsepto ng public service. Pag subsumed niya yung public utility, but there is now this list of what constitute public utilities. And these are the following services: distribution of electricity, we have transmission of electricity, which are two different things, of course. Then we have petroleum and petroleum products pipeline transmission systems. Then we have water pipelines distribution systems and wastewater pipeline systems. Then we have seaports, and finally public utility vehicles or PUVs. Okay. So all concessionaires, joint ventures, and other similar entities that wholly operate, manage, or control for public use said sectors shall be considered as public utilities also. So meron na talaga list, may enumeration na of what constitutes public utilities. So we can now delineate between between certain services, whether it constitutes public service as a whole or it is a public utility. Now, why is it important? Okay, because there are certain concessions given to those who operate public utilities. There are certain rules in relation to the operation of public utilities, and as well as with public service. Now, what about the definition of public service? Nagbago ba? Okay? No, it was retained. The definition of public service was retained in this new law, in this amendment. Okay, but the implication, of course, is that there can no longer be interchange, unlike before, wherein when you use the term public service, it can mean public utility and vice versa. Okay, so it's like since mas malaki yung konsepto ng public service, this is public service, subsumed yung mas maliit na konsepto o terminology na public utilities. Okay? So, all public utilities, di ba? Parang sa philo natin to, all public utilities may be considered or are considered rather as public services. But not all public services, no, are public utilities. Okay? Kasi meron ng specific enumeration of what are public utilities. Okay. Now, another amendment, no, is that the Congress, no, would have the power to classify a public service as a public utility. Okay? And on the other hand, the executive, meaning the president, no, may recommend to classify a public service as a public utility. But it is Congress which shall approve it, meaning it will be the one to enact, no, a law saying that this particular public service is a public utility. Now, how would the president do this? Okay? Upon the recommendation, of course, of the National Economic and Development Authority or NEDA, okay? So, it may propose to the Congress the classification of a public service as a public utility. And what are the criteria that must be met? No? So, para ma-recommenda ni Presidente. So, the person or juridical entity regularly supplies and directly transmits and distributes to the public through a network a commodity or service of public consequence. Second, that the commodity or service is a natural monopoly that needs to be regulated when the common good so requires. And then, the commodity or service is necessary for the maintenance of life and occupation of the public. And finally, as the last criterion, the commodity or service is obligated to provide adequate service to the public on demand. Now, another power which was given to the President under the amended Public Service Act is to suspend or prohibit proposed mergers or acquisitions involving public services that would effectively give control to foreigners. Okay? So, he can do that. Okay? In the interest, of course, of national security, and he can suspend such. Okay? Now, another important feature, no, in this amended law is that administrative agencies are prohibited from imposing nationality requirements on public services which are not classified as public utilities. So, it can no longer do that. Okay, so hindi pwedeng sabihin, eto, it needs to be owned exclusively by Filipinos or this, etc. So, administrative agency, mere administrative agencies of the government can no longer do that. Okay. Now, another prohibition in this law is that entities owned or controlled by foreign governments, no, or state-owned enterprises are prohibited from investing in public utilities or critical infrastructure. Okay. When we say foreign governments, state-owned enterprises, okay, for example, kunwari, a company is actually owned by China, or that a majority of the shares in that Chinese company is owned by the government, no, the Chinese government, then it cannot be allowed, no, to invest in public utilities in the Philippines or in critical infrastructure. Okay, so it says that further that entities owned or controlled by foreign governments or state-owned enterprises will be barred from making new investments in any public utility or critical infrastructure, save for sovereign wealth funds and independent pension funds of states subject to a 30% equity restriction. So, meron din namang exception. If the investment, no, if the equity of that state or foreign government is due to its sovereign wealth fund. Okay? Remember, diba, the state would have what? Two functions, diba? Yung ginagawa niya as a sovereign, and then also its functions as in business. Okay, so pwede niyang gawin yun, diba? Pwede siyang mag-invest in companies, But if the investment in the company is not due to sovereign wealth funds, then it cannot invest, no, that particular foreign government or state-owned enterprise, no, or entity which is controlled by foreign governments or state-owned enterprises cannot invest in public utilities in our jurisdiction. That is what the amendment is saying. Now, what about foreign nationals? So, foreign nationals may invest in public services classified as critical infrastructure as long as there is reciprocity. So, very crucial yun. Okay? Sinabi natin na karaniwan naman, di ba, kahit sa ating definition of what a foreign corporation is, it may only be considered as a foreign corporation if the country where it was established, no, also allows our local corporations to transact business, diba, or to do business in their jurisdiction. So, principle of reciprocity. Karaniwan, ganyan yung ating nilalagay. So, para may same treatment sa mga Filipino nationals or Philippine corporations. So, here, ganun din naman. Sabi, a foreign national is not allowed to own more than 50% equity in a public service engaged in the operation and management of critical infrastructure unless the country of such foreign national extends the same privilege to Philippine nationals as may be provided by their foreign law or by their law, by treaty, or by international agreement. So, generally, hindi ubra except if, again, there is reciprocity. Okay. Now, what about employment? So, yes, we are still allowing, no, foreign nationals to seek employment in the Philippines. Okay? But there must be a permit. So, sa DOLE, no, Department of Labor and Employment, we have what is known as the Alien Employment Permit or AEP. And they still need to do that. Okay? But, of course, no, it must be shown that there is no Filipino here who is capable of doing the job, no, that this foreign national intends to do. That's why he is applying for a permit. Okay. Now, what else should we remember about this amendment to the Public Service Act? So, telecommunications, no? Sa telecoms industry. So, according to the law, entities in the telecommunications sector must be certified compliant with ISO standards on information security. Okay? And this is more on a regulatory aspect, diba? And strengthen yung regulation of industries involved in the delivery of public services and public utilities. So, public service entities are subject to an annual performance audit, and the certificates issued pursuant to this particular law, no, RA 11659, may be suspended or revoked by the responsible administrative agencies if the holder, no, or the business entity has failed for 3 consecutive years to submit, no, or to perform or to conduct its annual performance audit, which should be made by an independent evaluation team. So, kailangan mag-comply talaga, maging compliant sa performance evaluation yung ating mga public utilities and public service agencies. And then, of course, there was now an increase in case of, in the penalties rather, in case of violation of the law, okay, of the Public Service Act. So, the fine now ranges from 5,000 pesos to up to 2 million per day, no, for every day. And this is for every day that there was this default or that there was this violation. Okay, and there's also the penalty of imprisonment just in case, no, there was this violation which meets this penalty. Okay, now what is the effect of this particular amendment to the law? Okay, of course we are happy na meron namang amendment because as we've said, this is 80 plus years na yung Public Service Act, and it's about time that certain, no, amendments are made to make the law, no, more responsive to the changing times, kasi syempre nadadagdagan yung mga utilities, yung konsepto natin, what public utilities and public services mean. So and of course with liberalization and globalization and everything, no, and the increasing role of the private sector in some of the work which are traditionally performed or done, or the services which are traditionally given by the government, di ba? So, syempre, kailangan na rin natin i-update, so to speak, yung batas. So, in a nutshell, the amendments actually opens key sectors such as telecommunications, diba? In our country, dati yan, parang ano lang, kaya nga pumasok yung dito, di ba? Kasi before, ayun lang yan, smart versus globe, etc. So, na-open, so meron ang pwedeng mag-compete. Okay? And, of course, dati meron tayong impose na 40% foreign equity restriction. So, medyo maluwag na, di ba? Yung ating mga rules. And, of course, as I've mentioned, the fact that there's now a clear distinction between Public Service Act and public service rather under the Public Service Act, and public utilities as amended, no, as now in the amended law, as appearing in the amended law, is welcome respite. Ganda-ganda yan kasi hindi na malilito mga tao, alin ba talaga. Although, of course, the broader concept is still public service, at least there's now this enumeration of what are considered as public utilities. Okay? And, there's also this rule in relation to the equity cap. Diba? Kasi dati, yun nga, mahigpit masyado, so may equity cap. But now, with the equity cap being removed, so these sectors, no, yung sa public utilities, can now accept investments, di ba, from foreign entities. Okay? So telecoms, what else? Shipping, railways, etc. So hindi na ganun ka-strict. Okay? So foreign nationals may now be allowed to own up to 100% equity in businesses that offer this particular services, diba? Such as telecoms. Yun. So, I think, no, and if you look also at the amendment in the revised corporation code, okay, makikita natin, diba, na talaga tinatry nila na i-update yung mga batas natin para makita, diba, dahil nakita na, rather, na-recognize na ng ating mga mambabatas that indeed, no, some of the provisions in our laws are no longer that responsive to the reality, okay, to the realities of our economy, diba? Talagang kailangan, diba, kailangan ngayon ng investment, and my example there in corporation law was, of course, before, joint venture agreement was not in the law. However, later on, no, through jurisprudence, sabi, inallow natin ang corporations to enter into joint venture agreements. And this is, of course, in recognition of the fact that there are certain endeavors, no, business endeavors that cannot be done by just one corporation. So they have to, ask for help from another corporation in order to undertake certain projects. Diba? So, parang ganun din dito. So, malaki na masyado yung telecommunications, diba? Baka walang local corporation na po pwede na, diba, na i-handle na lahat yun. Or baka, yun nga, gaya ng ating MRT, hindi naman kaya ng mga local to provide for that service. So, maybe we should allow, no? Or this time we should allow foreign entities with capabilities to do that, diba? Of course, subject to maybe build, operate, or transfer schemes, or technology transfers. So, yung mga ganun lang, diba, na mga requirement. But in order for us, no, to expand, in order for for especially in terms of infrastructure, then there is a need to really allow foreign investment to come in, and that is what the amendments to the Public Service Act provides. Now, in relation again to all of this, another special law which is a result of the fast pace of modernization is the Electronic Commerce Act of 2000, and in relation to this we have the rules on electronic evidence. So especially during the pandemic, I doubt if anyone of us can still say that they never bought something online. Okay? Ako nga madalas mabudol So especially during the pandemic when we cannot go out and buy whatever we need in the traditional way, such as going to the malls or to the groceries, etc. So we were stuck in our houses, and because of it, what happened was a lot of online sellers and selling platforms such as Shopee, such as Lazada, okay, and even the companies which actually manufacture or distribute products, they also opened up websites wherein they allowed online transactions. So with this, kitang-kita natin, even prior to the pandemic, meron na rin tayong electronic commerce, pero yung boom ng online buying, selling, and other similar transactions was really felt during the pandemic. Okay, so under the law, what is the policy of the state? So the law itself says that it is a recognition of the state of the vital role of information and communication technology in nation building, need to create an information-friendly environment, which supports and ensures the availability, diversity, and affordability of ICT products and services, and that the primary responsibility of the private sector in contributing investments and services in telecommunications and information technology. There's also the recognition of the need to develop, with appropriate training programs and institutional policy changes, human resources for the information technology, and the obligation of the state to facilitate the transfer and promotion of technology, and the need to marshal, organize, and deploy national information infrastructures comprising in both telecommunications network and strategic information services. Okay, so the law aimed to facilitate domestic international dealings, transactions, arrangements, agreements, contracts, and exchanges and storage of information through the utilization of electronic, optical, and similar medium, mode, instrumentality, and technology to recognize the authenticity and reliability of electronic documents related to such activities, and promote the universal use of electronic transactions in the government and general public. At nakakaupos po ng hininga dahil ang haba, di ba? Dadalawa lang yung objectives ng law, pero ang haba and very technical. So, we hear terms like information communications technology or ICT, we hear about infrastructure, we hear about electronic documents, okay? So, the act, this act, the Electronic Commerce Act of 2000, applies to any kind of data message and electronic document used in the context of commercial as well as non-commercial transactions. But, okay, before we can understand the coverage, that particular coverage, ano muna yung electronic data message? Okay, what does this mean? So, an electronic data message is an information generated, sent, received, or stored by electronic, optical, or similar means. Okay? And on the other hand, the electronic document refers to information or the representation of information, data, figures, symbols, or other modes of written expression described or however represented by which a right is established or an obligation extinguished, or by which a fact may be proved and affirmed which is received, recorded, transmitted, stored, processed, retrieved, or produced electronically. This is based on Section 5, Paragraph F of RA 8792. So, according to Administrative Matter number 01701 of this, which was promulgated by the Supreme Court, it includes digitally signed documents and any printout or output readable by sight or other means which accurately reflects the electronic data message or electronic document. Okay? And that's why we also have the rules on electronic evidence, which is what this administrative matter is more popularly known. And again, no, during the pandemic, doon natin nakita talaga yung extent ng atin na ngayon na magiging reliance, or di ba, at least during that time on electronic documents, di ba, or the fact that hearings are now conducted, no, or at that time, no, exclusively conducted through video conferencing, and the pleadings, no, and this is my first personal experience, pleadings, etc., are now being sent through email and then signed using either with your wet signature and then scanned, or you have facsimile of your signature and then it is superimposed on the document. So biglang naging ganon, di ba? Yung naging experience natin during the pandemic. Even our memoranda for the offices, all communications, no, even the documents like vouchers, etc., these were all electronically signed, no? So hindi lang commerce, hindi lang online businesses, but also all types of transactions which were done online or electronically. Okay, so but in terms of commerce, no, in terms of contracts, no, how would this affect, diba, if it is now done electronically? Kasi traditionally, diba, when we talk about contracts, so merong lugar kung saan sinasign, diba, yung kontrata. So doon we usually put our wet signature, diba, our original signatures on these copies of the documents. But now, diba, it is done electronically. So what is the effect? Now, the general rule under the law is that the elements required under existing laws for the formation of contracts, meaning the offer and then the acceptance, may be expressed in demonstrated and proved by means of electronic data messages or electronic documents. So it now recognizes that, diba, unlike before, wherein yun nga, you and the other party should meet, no? They usually meet face to face and then they sign the document, no, right then and there. Let's say maybe a contract of sale, a deed of sale. Pero ngayon, pwede na magkabentahan na saan dumaan, in-email lang, diba? And then pumirma yung kabila, then in-email back, then the other party would now sign this, and this is considered as valid and binding. Okay. According to the law, no contract shall be denied validity or enforceability on the sole ground that it is in the form of an electronic data message or electronic document, or that any or all of the elements required under the existing laws for the formation of contracts is expressed, demonstrated, and proved by means of electronic data messages or electronic documents. Okay. So, there's no difference now whether it was signed face to face, whether it bears, the original signature of the parties, or it was, in the form of an email which was printed and then, or the signature was scanned, etc. There's no difference now. Okay? Unless, okay, and that's a general rule, so merong exception, diba? The exception is if the parties agree otherwise. Okay, so kung sinabi nila hindi, kailangan pa rin natin na kailangan pa rin meron tayo hard document. Even if we agreed through electronic means, that we still need to have this reduced into the usual form of the contract. Okay. So what about banks? So even before the pandemic, for years already, we have the ATMs, etc. So meron na rin mga online transactions, especially between and among our banks. But under the law, also said that electronic transactions made through networking among banks or linkages thereof with other entities or networks and vice versa shall be deemed consummated upon the actual dispensing of cash or the debit of one account and the corresponding credit to another. So, as early as 2000 when the law was enacted, nakikita na natin yun. Talagang precursor na. When I mentioned the pandemic early on in my discussion, doon lang talaga natin nakita yung impact. Because before, even if we're doing it, diba? Even if our payrolls are now in ATMs and then we just send the money and then the money would now be reflected in one's accounts. And then of course, there were also transactions made online already as early as even before the year 2000. But as I've said, no, even the ordinary people, no, during the pandemic, talagang, ayun, nakaranas talaga how to do things online, how to, process and have online transactions. No? Internet lang, cellphone lang ang kailangan. Diba? Masyadong nagamit and naging obvious during the pandemic. Okay. Now, what about other matters on electronic transactions? Carriage of goods. Okay, so under the law on transportation, meron tayo carriage of goods. So, what about electronic commerce? So, here it says that it applies to any action in connection with or in pursuance of a contract of carriage of goods, including but not limited to furnishing the marks, number, quantity, or weight of goods, notifying a person of terms and conditions of the contract, giving instructions to a carrier, claiming delivery of goods, okay? So, giving any other notice. So, this is in relation to what? To online transactions, online business transactions, diba? Kasi nga, let's say, from the manufacturer to the online platform, and then finally to the delivery person or portal or whatever, and then makakarating dun sa bubili, diba? So, yung complete process ng transaction, it covers that. And the carriage of those goods, in order to fulfill the particular transaction. Now, under the law, it also says that where one or more data messages are used to effect any action in this, okay? So, meaning, the granting, the acquiring, renouncing, surrendering, transferring, or negotiating rights in goods, as well as the acquisition or transfer of rights and obligations under the contract, then no paper document used to effect any such action is valid unless the use of electronic data message or electronic document has been terminated and replaced by the use of paper documents. And the replacement shall not affect the rights or obligations of the parties involved. So, kasi, so you can, use paper and then later on online or electronic document na pag ganyan-ganyan. So, it shows the dynamic nature now of business transactions, diba? Mas bumibilis kasi nga allowed na pati yung mga electronic documents and electronic data messages. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, kitang-kita naman natin, na-experience natin during the pandemic how all of this works. Na although there had been, sometimes there were problems with our transactions, diba? But most of the time, and I don't think most lang, but 98% of the time, maayos naman, diba? Nakita natin in action how electronic commerce can really be used, or how it happens IRL or in real life. Ano ba yan? Diba? So, in terms of transport documents, so yes, electronic data messages or electronic documents will already be allowed, okay? As long as the following requirements are met. So, where the law requires that any action referred to contract of carriage of goods be carried out in writing or by using a paper document. Okay? or in the grant of a right to or acquisition of an obligation by one person where the law requires that in order to effect this, the right or obligation must be conveyed to that person by the transfer or use of a paper document. So, basta pwede nang gamitin lahat, di ba? Kahit email, kahit any type of electronic data message or electronic document. And the only exception would be if there is this agreement, no, that it will only be valid if there is a paper document. Okay? So, hindi na baliktad na, di ba? Sabihin dati kasi syempre, di ba, nagiging mas konti yung gumagamit ng mga online transactions, di ba, yung mga electronic data messages. But ngayon, medyo prevalent na. So, especially, no, 20 years hence after the law was enacted, so mas accepted na, definitely mas accepted na that transactions may be made electronically. Okay. Now, in government, of course, it's the same thing. So all departments, bureaus, offices, and agencies of the government, as well as GOCCs, no, that require or accept the filing of documents or filling of documents, require that documents be created or retained and submitted, or which issue permits or licenses or provide for the method and manner of payment of settlement of fees. So, kaya pwede na minsan, o di ba, hindi nga minsan, madalas, online payment, online filing, di ba, if you want to, let's say, in the Office of the Ombudsman, so we allow online filing for clearance applications. All other offices, pwede na rin yon. So, inallow na natin ang mga online filing and even online payment for the fees that would have to be paid. And there are now portals even by the local government units which allow no payment of a lot of the fees, taxes, etc. and all other dues that we need to pay for on behalf of the government or for the government. Okay, so this is really in recognition of the fact that this is one mode, no, electronic filing, electronic payment is here to stay. Okay, and one thing, no, and this is the last thing that I'm going to mention in relation to this law is in confidentiality. Okay, kasi kumadaan, di ba, yung ating mga information, diba, through these electronic documents, electronic data messages. So the law itself says, except for the purposes authorized under the law, any person who obtained access to any electronic key, electronic data message, or electronic document, book, registered correspondence information, or other material pursuant to any of the powers conferred under this law shall not convey to or share the same with any other person. So confidentiality, kasi at this time, no, meron ding possibility of what? Of or whatever you put in your electronic document or data message being accessed not just by you and the other party but other people na dinadaanan ng message. So to answer, no, or respond to that concern, the law itself says that there must be or there should be confidentiality. Okay? So these are the things that we should remember about the law, at least for purposes of what? Of understanding how it works and ensuring, no, that the very least, no, the salient features of these special laws nakita natin, diba? Alam natin kung ano yung mga laman yan. Again, this is for the purpose, of course, of your bar review, your bar examinations later in the year, and medyo malaki ang coverage ng mercantile law, mahahaba, marami tayong mga special laws, no? Meron tayo na una ng mga banking laws na diniscuss. Dito naman yung tatlo na laws natin which are interrelated in relation to commerce, especially foreign, no, investments, and then foreign corporations, and then also we discuss the effect, no, of the amendments in the Public Service Act, and finally the E-Commerce Act, and medyo konti on rule on evidence, as well as that on transport of goods as well as government online government transactions. So I hope that this very short discussion of these laws would give you an idea, of what these special laws intend to accomplish, the objectives for which they were enacted, and that, as I've said earlier, these are actually in response, to the clamor to update our laws as well as in recognition of the rapidly changing times, including that brought about by technology. So that is all for this lecture, and thank you.